So ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, Barkha Dutt is a well-known Indian television journalist and author and has been part of NDTV's team for 21 years. She's won many national and international awards, including the Padma Shri, India's fourth highest civilian honor. At NDTV, Barkha Dutt was the host of the weekly award-winning talk show, We the People, as well as the daily primetime show, The Buck Stops Here. Her reporting of the Kargil conflict brought her to prominence in India, and she has covered conflicts in Kashmir, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And of course, over the years, has written many columns for national and international newspapers. We're so excited to have you with us once again, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause for Ms. Barkha Dutt. She will be leading us in this panel discussion. We're all really looking forward to it.
Good morning, everyone. Colonel David, Ranjana, General Malik, and of course, I should say Colonel David and Renuka, and General Malik and Dr. Ranjana Malik, and so many old friends and men and women I look up to. It is an honor and privilege to be here today. Before I introduce our guests and call them up on the stage, just a little bit about the backdrop in which General Malik led our troops to victory in the battlefield. One famous line of General Malik that he did not repeat in his opening remarks, but I think is worth quoting or reminding people, he said, "We will fight with what we have." And I think today, 25 years on, many young people may not actually remember how extraordinary that fight was, given so many disadvantages and lack of resources at that time. And really, it was all about the courage and valor on the battlefield ahead of anything else. For me, covering the first conflict I had ever covered in my life with no background of war reporting, I was not yet even 27 years old. I was a little over 26. And the men I was meeting at the front line were mostly couple of years younger than me, 23, 24, 22. That was the age group of the men I was meeting. And to watch these young men march towards possible and often certain death without literally batting an eyelid, it was extraordinary. And it would have a lasting impact on who I was to become, both as a journalist and as a human being. I have often said to General Malik that it was the honor and privilege of a lifetime to be able to be a reporter at the front line. In 30 years of being a journalist, and I've seen some very, very difficult assignments, the chance to report from the Kargil front line was a masterclass in life. It has taught me everything I know about what courage is really about, how vulnerability can coexist with courage, how compassion can coexist with courage. It has taught me about life and death. It has taught me how to be a reporter under any circumstance. And it has been the beginning of a lifelong love affair with the Indian military, of which I remain its most devout and outspoken admirer and fan. I'll just say one other little anecdote. Even today as I speak, I have goosebumps thinking of the fact that there was an opportunity to actually record and witness an extraordinary moment in Indian history. To be a young reporter who met Vikram Batra, for instance, at the front line, and in a very naive way said to him, "Aapko dar nahi lagta?" That is actually what I asked him. I said, "Aren't you scared?" Because I was looking at this swashbuckling soldier whose smile went right up to his eyes. And I remember meeting him after a successful operation, and he was very tired, so he was sitting with a group of young soldiers under a tent. And there was a tattered copy of Cosmopolitan magazine that they were just passing around just to distract themselves. And I said, "Vikram, aren't you scared?" And he threw his head back and he laughed and he said, "Ye dil mange more." And I think that when I recorded that on tape, I had no idea how cult that was going to become. And that time it was a Pepsi Cola slogan. And the moment Vikram said it on camera, in that interview to me, it became a national motto. And to have had that privilege of being able to meet men like Vikram Batra and so many of the stalwarts I'm about to introduce remains the privilege of a lifetime. One last thing, Kargil has often been called India's first televised war. I don't know how many of you know that it was an age before broadcast vans, satellite uplinking, none of this existed. There were not even any mobile phones. This was Jammu and Kashmir in 1999. Phones were blocked, and one of the biggest challenges for reporters like myself was how to get footage back to Delhi. And we would walk up and down the highway to halts where our choppers were taking off, carrying the coffins of our heroes back home. And we would beg the pilots, can you, sir, please carry our tapes? And that's how footage used to go back. So there are many, still 25 years later, many untold and understood and underappreciated stories of the Kargil War. Thank you, Colonel David, for making me part of this moment that is so dear to me, professionally and personally. Thank you, General Malik, who has been almost like a life mentor ever since Kargil, for being who you are. And to Dr. Ranjana Malik, you're going to hear her later, but she's one hell of a feisty and outspoken army wife. And I have been telling her she has to write her own book because she has many stories to tell. And army wives, to all of you here, you are no less soldiers yourself. And to women who are now in bigger roles, I am so proud but also so envious. If I had been any younger, I'd be signing up to be in the military today. I want to now introduce our wonderful guests. It is my privilege to welcome them on stage. First, the architect in the battleground of the victory, General Mohinder Puri. If Tololing and Tiger Hill are today household names, it is because of his command in the battlefield. Come on, we can do better than that. I want to hear loud applause from the floor. At the back, I want to hear you louder. I also want to call on stage General Y.K. Joshi. You have seen renditions of him in our movies, from LOC to Sher Shah. He got his, I don't know how many of you know, but he actually got his command in the battlefield. And his unit had the distinction of actually being recognized and honored with 2 Paramveer Chakras and was called the bravest of the brave. Welcome, sir. General Lakhwinder Singh, I don't know how many of you may remember from the television images of that time, the Bofors guns, right? I don't know how many of you fully understand, those of you in the military certainly do, but outside of the military community, that without the artillery, you see, our soldiers were climbing up the jagged mountain peaks to take the territory back from the Pakistani soldiers who were sitting on top of it. But that climb up would not have been possible without the artillery fire that provided them that, in a way, safe cover, but also targeted the enemy, depending on the tactics at that time. So without the artillery, without the gunners, this victory would not have been ours. I want to welcome General Lakhwinder Singh to the stage. Please put your hand together to welcome him. Okay, I want to hear uproarious applause from the floor. Don't be miserly and stingy with your applause. These are extraordinary men on the stage. So please. Good morning and welcome, sir. And last but not the least, the officer who led the air war from the ground in Kashmir. You have to remember that the Air Force played a critical role coordinating with the army and under instructions, as General Malik just spelled out, to not cross the line of control. Now, while that impacted the army, it actually impacted the Air Force the most because they had to maneuver their jets in such a way that their jets were not crossing the line of control. It was one hell of a difficult task, and we're going to understand more about that. I want to welcome on the stage Air Marshal Menon. Air Marshal Menon. Okay, you have to help me here with louder applause. We need some mics on the stage, please. Could we have mics on the stage for our guests? General Puri, let's start with you. When you shut your eyes and you rewind to 25 years ago, what is the first image that comes in your mind? Sir, it's not on.
Yeah, before I start, I'd like to thank Colonel David and Mrs. Renuka David for having given us this opportunity to remember 25 years of the Kargil War. And thank you, Barkha, for starting the discussion with me. The first thing which strikes me always is the courage of our young officers and men. That's the most striking part of the entire operation. Because had they not performed, perhaps it would have been well nigh impossible for us to gain this.
If that courage, can you all hear me at the back? No, right? Can you all hear me at the back? Please say yes or no if you can. Okay. If that courage had to take the shape and form of an image, कहते हैं ना कि आंख बंद करके you remember one thing. What is that one thing?
I think the Dil Mange board, which you said, definitely. And it's this young boy, I'd interacted with him. After that, all the young officers and the men who I interacted with, the most striking part of that was that you shake hands when you're talking to them in the morning, and while you're in the operations room in the evening, and you hear that they're no more. I think that is the feeling which really upsets you tremendously. Because these are young boys. I mean, today they would have been major generals in the army. When I think of all the gallant young officers who are no longer with us, they would have been brigadiers or major generals today, 25 years later. So these things, leave an emotional scar on you. You always remember what contribution they've made and how they fought the war, the courage which they've displayed, just to uphold the traditions of their regiment and their country.
I mean, in fact, I remember after that interview with Vikram Batra, that was the first obituary I had to write. And I'd never written an obituary before. And to do it from the war front, now I can't imagine as leaders when you had to send these young boys. They were boys, really. They were in their early 20s, boys who would be men. General Joshi, Vikram was in your unit. General Joshi, Vikram was in your unit. But alongside Vikram, there were many other young men who, as I said in my opening, were marching to almost certain death in some operations. They knew that the likelihood of them coming back alive was very little. The percentage chance of survival was not always very high. As someone who had to take that decision, how difficult was that?
So, thank you, Barkha. Thank you, Colonel David, for getting me here today and remembering the Kargil War, which we fought 25 years ago. Those decisions are not very difficult. That is what we are trained for throughout our lives. What does the army do in peacetime? We train for war. And that was one opportunity that came our way, and the battalion had to show itself, that how well they have trained. And finally, the character of the armed forces of the Indian Army is built up upon a set of values, a set of values which are the basis of the ethos of the Indian Army. And it is this set of values, that push a soldier, a young officer, to face the challenges of the wartime, and even to the extent, when the time comes, to make the supreme sacrifice. And what are the set of values that we are brought up in, in the battalion? It's the honor. It's your self-respect. It's, your physical and moral courage, your dedication, your sense of duty, selfless sacrifice. All these things, are always there on your mind. And the fear of dying in battle, it never crosses your mind, actually. And neither did it cross, I'm sure, the mind of any of our soldiers or the young officers who were there on the battle.
It doesn't cross your mind because you don't have time for that fear, or because you're trained to dispel that fear?
You are not free, but you have a task at hand which has to be accomplished. And that is what the whole team, the whole battalion, the whole company, platoon is focused at that moment.
General Lakwinder Singh, today's young Indians in corporate sector have shifts. In the army, there are no shifts. There's no 9 to 5. There's no 11 to 7. Your gunners were working 24 hours cycles, blisters on their hand, working those RT guns. And I think I must give you an opportunity to explain the role better than I did as a layperson. I explained it as a layperson. As a military man, What was the toughest thing for you, in terms of how you were directing those guns? What was the single most difficult decision on the battleground?
I would first like to thank you, Colonel David and Renuka David, for the great initiative where you bring about the army and the civilian together on one plane. A lot of our friends in the country don't know what army does and how army operates. They know of bravery, they know of courage, they know everything, but they don't know the intricacies of what goes through when you're fighting a war. So Barkha asked me what is one great thing that really moved me there. Actually, I think greatest thing that moved me in war, Kargil War, was the sync with which infantry and artillery fought together. It was one winning factor to which the Pakis had no answer, but only fear and despair. These two people are fighting, artillery and infantry, fighting like a body and soul in one, and it proved as a nemesis for the Pakis. Our biggest reward came from by this method of saving casualties. We saved so many casualties through this that I think that was the biggest award that we got as gunners.
And we'll talk more about that, but Marshal Menon, General Malik spoke about the order not to cross the line of control, and later Brajesh Mishra conceded that if needed, that could be reviewed. But for the Air Force, that created an immediate battleground challenge. Could you explain what that challenge was?
I will. Before that, I want to thank Colonel David and Mrs. Renuka David for affording me unaccustomed luxury after retirement. Before I come to you, Barkha, I would like to say that Kargil War was a war to recapture lost territory. To recapture territory, you require boots on the ground, and that's what our professional army wonderfully did well. The Air Force helped them, and helped them well, and I think to the best of their ability, and the Air Force did a fairly good job of it. Now to your question. To build up towards that, I think by the 23rd, 24th, we had a fairly good idea of how many posts and what were the targets required to be attacked by the Indian Air Force. 15 corps officers used to come down to Srinagar and discuss with people from my team to what are the targets to be attacked, how to attack them and all. Any attack, air-to-ground attack, has to have certain considerations. One is that you must be able to see the target clearly. Second is that you must be able to deliver your weapons at the correct range. Another thing is, after the attack is over, you must not expose yourself to enemy fire for a long time. That means, preferably, you should fly towards your own territory. These are some of the essentials of a dive attack. All our attacks till 25th evening were, because the LOC alignment there is approximately east-west with some diversions, all our attacks were north to south. All. And that, when the bombshell fell on us that we are not to cross the LC, that created a bit of a problem. We had to redo all our attack plans. Not crossing the LC came as a bit of a shock to us. And when doing the LC, we had to go for suboptimal options of attack. So there was a tremendous effect on the Air Force of not crossing the LC. Had we been allowed to cross the LC, probably it would have, the Air Force impact would have been much more in the earlier days.
So let's pick that up, General Puri. Had the mandate been open on crossing the line of control, some things would have been easier, but the war could have escalated. And I know General Malik had war-gamed this in such a way that had you all not been able to take back these peaks, you would have probably had to open another front. But suppose you had been given a free hand in crossing the line of control, would the war have looked different?
Yes, I think we would have been able to end the war in a faster time frame.
Without escalation?
Sorry?
Without escalation, would it not have gone up?
Yeah, perhaps it might not have, because we were well deployed all along the Western Front, all along in J&K. The chief had moved the reserve formations to Sonamarg. So in case anything adverse was happening, we had adequate contingency plans to respond to any initiative which we were taking across the line of control. So in my perception, I think perhaps the war would not have escalated to such an extent, but we would have got some tactical gains at the end of the war, which was very essential. We could have got some dominating heights. We could have got down to the road and cut them off, perhaps. So all these are things which, you can think about. But once a terms of reference was given, I suppose, so be it. That was...
Barkha, may I say one thing? Even if we had crossed the LC and come, we are attacking points on our own side of the LC.
Correct.
So we were not dropping bombs or rockets across the LC, but on our side. So I don't think escalation was much of a problem. I don't think escalation should have come in.
But had you crossed and they would have shot at our Air Force jets?
Look, that risk we had to take. Otherwise, the attack wouldn't have gone through. But
Yeah.
definitely, it would have the Air Force impact would have been much more had we been allowed to cross the LC and attack from a north to south direction.
Yeah, and we'll understand a little later because there's so many people here who would want to know what that did to the mechanics of flying and what that meant for maneuvering within this side of the line of control. But General Joshi, personal story. You got your command in the field. You're there in the ground fighting this battle, and you get your command. I mean, do you remember that moment crystal clear, like it was yesterday and not 25 years ago?
Yeah, of course, I can never forget that. And for me personally, actually, the Kargil War literally swept me off my feet in the classic sense. Our unit was deployed in Sopore. We were doing counter-terrorist operations. We had finished our tenure, and we were due to move to a peace station, and that was Shahjahanpur. And I, as a second in command, had already moved down to Shahjahanpur, and I was sitting pretty there, swimming pool, tennis, open-air theater, and we were looking at the unit to fetch up there. And then Kargil happened. So overnight, we were taken to Chandigarh, put into a IL-76, the advance party. The unit moved from Sopore across the Zojila and concentrated at Gumri. And we were flown from Chandigarh to Srinagar. And on the 10th of June, I crossed the Zojila and joined back the battalion. 11th of June, we were placed under Command 56 Mountain Brigade to be reserved for the capture of Tololing. 12th, we moved to Dras. And 13th night, I was sitting on top of Tololing. 4th day,
Amazing.
From a swimming pool in Shahjahanpur to sitting on top of Tololing. And the scene there, I met Colonel Kushal Thakur, CO-18 Grenadiers, with 7-8 mortal remains of his soldiers who had died in the RT attack, RT shelling the previous night, the same night when we climbed up. And, as I was trying to understand the situation, RT shells exploding all around us, I could hear the MMG firing of the enemy from point 5140 towards us. Troops running helter-skelter, dust, raising up and down. And I thought that this is a nightmare, just 4 days. And I thought that somebody is going to wake me up, and then I'll be back in Shahjahanpur. And then to, further complicate matters, my radio operator, Mohan, I still remember, came running to me and he says, "Saab, GOC साहब आपसे बात करना चाहते हैं." And I was wondering why should the GOC want to speak to a second in command of a battalion sitting on top of Tololing. And then he was there, my code name was Chanakya, and he says, "Delta for Chanakya, is it Joe?" That's right. We did the teleconversation, over and out and all that. And he says, "Okay, your CO has taken ill, so he's being evacuated and you are in command. On top of Tololing, among the RT shelling, casualties all around."
How old were you at this point?
It took me a moment to
how
digest.
How old were you?
I am 62 born, so that makes it about 38.
Okay. And then it took time to process this?
Yeah, it took time for me to process because this was a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of a war and in the thick of it actually. And now, as a second in command in an infantry battalion, you are, a little low profile, advising the CO, and the CO takes a decision, everything gets fired from his shoulder. But suddenly now, I realize that now I have to be planning these operations. I will be ordering my troops into battle. And on my command, troops will be laying down their lives. That's a huge responsibility in war. But again, it comes once in a lifetime. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that the battalion did outstandingly well. The youngsters, had very young company commanders. We'll talk about that later. But they did an outstanding job. And the battalion came out in flying colors.
Okay, I'm actually told that there's a video we have. General Joshi's brought some footage. Sir, is it with sound or is it? It's with sound. So maybe in a couple of minutes, I'll queue for it and we can have a look at it. We'll just do a little bit of conversation first. General Puri, before I come to General Lakhwinder Singh, we were talking at dinner last night about the power of one and what a difference leaders on the ground can make. And you said that in the context of General Joshi. And of course, the entire driving force of the military is its camaraderie, is the paltan, is the buddy, is the izzat, is the honor. But the individual matters. The individual matters when it comes to leadership performance. So talk a little bit about that. In war, how critical are individuals?
I think in war, leadership is a critical factor. And what Yogi was just saying, I'll just like to elaborate on that. His battalion 13 Jackrif, they were there in Sopor. And that is when my division was looking after the insurgency in North Kashmir. And I found the battalion sort of not coming up to the mark in counterinsurgency operations. So the war started, the battalion was going for their peace tenure, and the advance party, like he said, had already moved. Then we had successfully captured Tololing. After 2 Rajdev did a commendable job under Colonel Ravindranath. And we were sitting in the brigade ops room, and I was just moving around in the Ras, and I saw the CO of 13 Jackrif moving around there. So I said, why are you here? Why aren't you up at Tololing? He says, sir, I'm pushing my people up. I said, no, you should be pulling your guys up instead of pushing them up. So he said, I'm not physically up to it, which I understood. I said, people in high altitudes do not respond physically to the challenges. So I said, okay, you go to the hospital and we'll have a new CO in your place. I rang up the corps commander and I said, sir, this is what has happened, and I'm promoting, giving the badges of rank to Major Joshi, and he had been approved for a lieutenant colonel. So we sent the badges of rank, and I think he was in the assembly area ready for the assault when he got his badges of rank. But that change in leadership had a tremendous impact on the battalion. And thereafter, I think thereafter they didn't look back at all. They got the unit citation, they got the bravest of the brave, and they got 2 Paramveer Chakras. One of them is over here, Subedar Major Sanjay Kumar. So I think leadership is a very, very important aspect. Can I touch on this a bit more? I want to quote another case.
Yes, sure.
Leadership. And that is Colonel Ravindranath. His wife is also here. Colonel Ravindranath was an outstanding CO by all standards. We lost him 5 years back. A tremendous soldier. And who had the, total pulse of the unit in his hands. He could gauge how the unit is going to respond, totally dedicated to his battalion. And we lost him that time. And I think it was his leadership again, which turned the tide for us with the first victory which we got at Tololing. And thereafter, we didn't look back. It became more or less a ridge hopping exercise, from one ridge to another, with a lot of casualties though, but I think he set the tone for the future battles.
Yeah. General Lakhwinder Singh, what was the most nerve-wracking hour? What was the most nerve-wracking hour or day or moment that you remember?
So, Barkha, before you answer your question, I want to put this audience thing, a very important part of this battle. The Kargil battle was a battle of valor and heroics and bravery of infantry, men and officers, young officers, and artillery in equal measure. The heroics of infantry and the prowess of artillery made this war victory possible. And I say this with full responsibility and understanding that if it was not for artillery, this war may have caused a lot of casualties, unacceptable casualties, or may not have happened at all. The victory may not have come across at all. I'm not saying that because a statement which they want to make for gunners. I'm saying a statement because we go back in history. In 1854 Crimea War, if you remember, the Charge of Light Brigade, where the people charged on the orders of their superiors on a well-prepared positions, and most of them lost their lives. It also happened in Saragadi, where a small knoll, few Sikh men withheld so many Afridis and other people, thousands of them, and let them not come near them. It also happened in Kargil, when 18 grenadiers was in Toroling, and they were not able to capture these heights. They crept up close to the enemy, about 200 to 400 meters from there, and then, smitten by the lack of success, they launched 2 attacks. One led by Major Rajesh Adhikari, and second by Lieutenant Colonel Vishwanathan. To capture those heights, they were very brave people, very gallant people. They started off the line, and within a short distance, mowed down by the enemy. So our worry was that if short distance of 200 meters cannot be covered by infantry, then how will our infantry climb 2,000 feet up and cover 3-4 kilometers and face these people? Enemies sitting atop these vantage points, well laced with automatic weapons, with full domination and full vision of what is happening around them, would have not allowed to move on top. And I validated this point by saying what the chief of Pakistan Army told Mr. G. Partha Sarthi after the war. And he says, the way your artillery was used, we were forced to vacate the heights, or we would have never left those heights.
Can I ask you something, sir? The decision to directly fire on the peaks where the Pakistanis were sitting, that was something that you all had to work on. It wasn't something that came automatically to you. Can you speak a little bit about that? That the guns were directly firing on the Pakistanis, not just providing sort of cover when needed for our soldiers.
We realized that unless we made the enemy defenses irrelevant, our infantry can never go up. And artillery is an area weapon. It covers a wide area, and we know way of shooting precisely at the enemy targets. So therefore, I had served with Beaufort Regiment before, and I, in concert with Jan Puri, who was here with my GOC, we decided one day to try out a system of direct firing at long distances. I remember on the 6th of June, 1999, we took 4 guns, 2 field guns and 2 Beaufort guns at the base of Toroling. Toroling was the closest point where the enemy had come. 4 kilometers from there, and we laid the best people on the gun, and direct firing a system where the gun crew can see the target. And we requested 18 grenadiers sitting on top. On Toroling, I said, please give us some leeway so if we fire, there's no fratricide and our shell does not land on them. So with great preparation and with prayers on our lips, we tried with Beauforts on a place called Barbad Bunker. That bunker had given the maximum casualties to the grenadiers. And I still recollect that last thing of Tar Singh. He looked like a carpenter, but he had a hand as steady as a surgeon. He aimed at the gun with prayers on our lips. We fired the first shot. The first shot fell somewhere close to Barbad Bunker. And then third or fourth shot, we were hitting bang on. So we had we processed the Beaufort system to fire accurately at these places. Before we could try with 105mm guns, we were fired upon, we had to leave that place, but we had achieved our aim. So Beaufort became a game changer. It changed the complex of the war in Kargil. And as we were planning on Beauforts, the idea came to us. We did brainstorming in our brigade. We said that let us use 100 guns to fire on these targets to throw TNT equivalent of mini nuke. So they're totally pulverized. Imagine each gun, if fires about 30 kilos of shell, and 100 guns are firing, that means at any one time, 300 kilos of shell are falling on the place, repeatedly. So therefore, enemy was totally pulverized. And now, the biggest challenge for infantry was to cover up with the enemy when artillery was far lifted. To the audience who would understand this, artillery is area weapon. So when you was 400, 500 meters from the where the fire is coming, you are supposed to stop firing. Otherwise, it will cause casualty to the own men. Now, this 400 and 500 meters is 1 mile. It was most difficult to cover. So it is here that we used direct firing Beauforts in direct firing role, as also multi-barrel rocket launchers. And infantry got so used to it, we were firing till as long as infantry wanted and as close as 50 to 100 meters. Now that was a great bonanza for infantry, which saved many casualties. And every fire plan we did this, and every fire plan we fired, we heard Pakistan transmitting on radio, "Hame bachao, yahan pe कहर बरस रहा hai." It was music to our ears. And that's how we planned this.
Fabulous. Marshal, a little bit about the challenge of maneuvering as a pilot, as an Air Force pilot, with the mandate to not cross the LC.
In the higher altitudes of Kargil, where we were operating at 17,000, 18,000 feet, at sea level, the aircraft operates extremely well, but as the air gets less dense, the operational efficiency of the airframe and the engine reduces. So if it takes 1 kilometer to do a turn, it takes 1.5 to 2 kilometers at those altitudes. So maneuvering the aircraft at those altitudes is a little more, not difficult, but it takes more space. That is why the ability, if we had been able to cross the LC and attack from that direction, it would have helped us, because any other maneuvering would be in our own airspace and not in where we would be exposed to any more enemy fire and all. So any aircraft operating at high altitudes has to retain certain, you have to maintain certain caution about that.
Let's talk about, General Joshi, the terrain, the height, the altitude, of course, but the jaggedness of the mountains. The fact that this is 25 years ago, the soldiers don't always have what is needed operationally that we would have today to do this. Firstly, this war has been forced on us, so we haven't had any lead time to prepare for it. We just have to go in. But, as General Malik had said then, we will fight with what we have. Describe what that is to somebody who isn't in the military. What does it mean to be sitting on top of those heights or climbing up to those heights without necessarily the most contemporary sort of weaponry or means of warfare available?
So, sitting here, to those who have not been to Ladakh, it's very difficult to imagine the kind of terrain that is obtainable in that area. You have to actually see it for yourself to realize, whatever I may say now, you'll not be able to understand the gravity of the challenge that we were facing. So the terrain, the moment you cross Zojala, there is no cover at all. Suddenly there is no greenery. It's all bald, huge mountains. The altitude that we were operating on, 16 to 18,000 feet, sub-zero temperatures, glaciated areas, lack of oxygen. So troops require acclimatization. That further slows down the operation. You require acclimatization at various stages, 6 days, 4 days, at stage 1, 2, and 3. And here we are operating at stage 2 and 3. So therefore, in case a battalion has to be inducted, it takes that much more time. So those were challenges. Now, at that altitude, even your weapons and equipment, they misbehave. They have to be recalibrated. Artillery, I'm sure, would have faced a lot of problem to recalibrate, because the range tables that are there, at a particular angle you're firing at, you can predict where the round will fall. But at that altitudes, they have to be recalibrated. The wear and tear, because of the temperatures, the lack of oxygen, on the weapons and equipment was too much. Then the biggest challenge was that, even if you acclimatize, the rate of movement of an infantry soldier is very slow. It takes 10 minutes to walk 100 yards, more than 5 times what it takes in the normal planes. So that further slows down the operation. And now you have the enemy sitting on top in dominating positions. And from there, he's able to observe you and he's able to bring down very accurate fire onto you. Now, we were to launch assaults, when you launch assaults to recapture these features and, recapture the enemy sitting on the top, you have to attack along these spur lines. Now, in that terrain, in Ladakh, these spur lines are very, very narrow. So while we would like to assault in extended line, you have to now here move in a single file. And since the approaches are narrow, slip and fall, it's certain death. And if there's an enemy sitting on top with MMG, down the same spur where you're going to attack, you can imagine there's no place to take cover, nowhere to hide. So those were challenges that we were facing, and against which, of course, the equipment, by the time my battalion moved in, we got the best of the equipment. The ECC clothing, the rations that came in and all that were pretty comfortable there.
I want you all to share a personal memory. I think, a lot has been spoken about strategy and tactics and maneuvers and operations. But personally, what stays with you? General Puri, one memory, of course you've spoken about the courage of the young men, but one particular personalized memory that maybe you haven't told anyone yet.
No, I've written it in my book.
I know,
also.
but maybe a lot of people here may not know. So tell us.
No, memories, there are many. It's very difficult for me to just pinpoint a
One,
particular
okay.
memory. There are many memories which keep, just coming to your mind. And I think I'll let it be at that.
Is there something you would have done differently, looking back?
Yeah, I've been asked this question many a times. Would you have done it differently? I really don't find an option if I could have done it differently. There was no other option. There were the heights. There was the enemy sitting on those heights. We had our troops down below. We had to go up those heights. And that's what we did. And, once the enemy is on these such dominating heights, there is no other way you can evict them. With preponderance of artillery fire, air power, and your own boots on the ground.
For a moment, tell us what would have happened had we not taken those heights back. You see, it isn't only about the principle of the Pakistanis sitting on Indian territory and needing to boot them out. It is also about what would have happened had we not taken those peaks back.
See, we're talking about June, July,
Yeah.
99. The monsoons, we were in the monsoons. 3 months later, the snow would have started falling, say about November. And the intention was to evict them before to give us adequate time to sort of redeploy in these heights which we had captured. So time was at a premium. And if we had not captured these heights, then they would have had the time, the snow would have fallen, they would have consolidated the gains, and they would have changed the entire alignment of the line of control as far as the Indus River is concerned, north of Indus, as far as the National Highway and north was concerned. So I think it would have had major impact on the security of our country, and as far as J&K is concerned, that part east of Zujila would have been a very, very difficult proposition to regain.
It's chilling to even contemplate it today. General Akhwinder, a personal memory. General Puri has too many. Do you have one that you want to share?
Yes, I have a very personal memory and I feel very proud of it. After every attack, I saw infantrymen walking up to gun areas and saluting them as saviors. That really touched my heart. So we were so close to each other, and it was very moving. And I want to relate 2-3 incidents you permit, because it'll bring to you the perspective that General Puri and we had planned together. One was, while attacking on a Marpula Ridge, there was a ridge called Marpula Ridge, and there are 2 spurs. On one spur, the attack was being launched with 2 Rajrif. And the leading company was tasked to capture the 3 knoll area. There were 3 knolls. You can imagine 3 knolls. On those 3 knolls, there were 3 machine guns. And the company was very daring, very bold. They were able to neutralize 2 machine guns. The 3rd machine gun held on to them. They could not proceed. There was Major Acharya and Vijan Thapar, company commander and company officer. They're very valiant people. They tried to outflank that. They tried to capture it. They charged on them, and both of them got martyred. They both lost their lives. Now, in the company at night at 2 o'clock, there was no officer left there, but only a junior commissioned officer. So the message came to us, General Puri told me do something, and so I said, please ask them to move out. We'll try a Boffer gun firing. Firing at night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, a dart firing. So it's not really dart firing because we had evolved a system that if night such situation came, we should be able to fire that even at night the similar manner. So we put the best gunner on the gun and we fired a round, and the round fell close to the machine in the bunker. The GSO corrected fire, and at third or fourth round hit the bunker. Now that was the line, a very thin line, was victory and defeat, and we crossed that to victory, and we won this thing.
Fabulous.
One was that. The other important one that happened was when Tiger Hill was captured. It came to us in the morning. We were sitting in the command post the whole night, and when General Puri left, and he said he got a report that by Colonel Thakur of 18 Grenadiers that we have captured Tiger Hill. He left very happy, and he said, Lakhvinder, you have done it again. The infantry walked slung arms to the Tiger Hill. Now, that was a great morale booster for us. And then it was not so easy. The Pakistan was not going to give up so easily on Tiger Hill. So they launched a counterattack.
Yeah.
As they launched a counterattack, it was a very fierce counterattack. That's a philosophy. Pakistan philosophy launched immediate counterattacks. And there was Yogendra Yadav, who was part of the Ghatak platoon, was on top. And they could not face the attack. So they told the CO that please bring on artillery fire on us. And the CO told him, Thakur told him, if I bring artillery fire on you, you're sure to die. It is a sure death, because they're very effective. So you know what he said? He says, sir, marna to waise bhi hai, marna aise bhi hai. Artillery fire karo. And we fire artillery, and the counter was repulsed.
Fabulous. I'm watching the clock. So, Marshal, a personal memory, and then we have time for last comments. Marshal?
Yeah, one thing I remember is on the 27th, when young Nachiketa, his aircraft flamed out while he's firing, his MiG-27. He tried to relight, he could not. He ejected, and he called out ejecting. Ajay Ahuja, who was just behind him in a MiG-21 mission, heard him and said, I am going to look for him. Now this is the finest spirit of fighter flying. If somebody goes down, you try to search where he is landed or where he is landing so that you could, initiate the rescue process. Ajay Ahuja, unfortunately, during this process of looking for Nachiketa, lost altitude and came within the firing parameters of the Stinger or Anza-2 that you were shot at with. That is one. Second is, after we lost the helicopter, and because of the large number of shoulder-fired missiles that we then knew were available at all the peaks, we paused our air operations. I went to the helicopter squadron and said, look, folks, for the time being, we are stopping all operations. They were angry. They said, no, sir, we want to go and attack. We want to go. The person who shot down our MiG-17, we want to shoot down that particular thing. So that spirit of the thing is what I remember.
And in the last 3 minutes we have left, I have two questions for both of you. On the spirit of the military wasn't only that you don't leave a man behind. You go, you find your buddy, you risk your life, you do whatever you can for your paltan, for your buddy. The Indian military's ethos, in my opinion, was best captured by the fact that when Pakistan refused to acknowledge that it was their soldiers in that battlefield, and there can be nothing worse that a country can do to its soldier than to disown them. But that is what Pakistan did. Pakistan did not want to admit that these were Northern Light Infantry men. They didn't want the bodies back. The Indian military performed the last rites for the bodies of Pakistani soldiers in the battlefield in the middle of the war. That spirit, General Puri, you have to talk about. That ethos.
Yeah, I think it's a part of our culture. It's a part of our military ethos. And that's what we are pretty good at doing. Honoring the enemy, a man who's put up a good, decent fight. We shouldn't take the Pakistani as any riffraff force. It's a very professional army. They were poorly led, but the soldiers were outstanding.
But was it weird that you had to perform those last rites?
Yes, I'll just tell you that. And so that's a part of our upbringing. So we had to honor the dead as we honor our own dead. And that's the time when the instructions had also come from the army headquarters that they must be given a decent sort of a burial. And we took these padri, we took our Maulavis by helicopter and to Yogi's battalion at point 4875, where he performed some of these burials of these Pakistani soldiers.
Amazing.
And then later on, when the frontier force,
Yeah.
they were the first ones who said, no, we want our men back. So with full military honors, we repatriated those bodies in a very ceremonial function and in the best traditions of the army.
One thing we haven't spoken about before I give General Joshi the last word. Briefly, sir, 1.5 minutes, and I want to play his footage also. Can I please ask the floor for 2 minutes grace time? General Puri, one thing we haven't spoken about is when these men were allowed to retreat, those who were left over. India had taken back most of the peaks, but then Nawaz Sharif is in the US, and the Americans sort of ensured that in the last mile, some of these guys are able to just retreat. When I'm sure at that point you wanted to eliminate them and not allow them a retreat or a safe retreat. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, the timing of the ceasefire perhaps was not very appropriate as far as the military operations were concerned. But like it was declared, so there's nothing one can do about it.
How did you feel about it?
95% of the territory had been recovered by then. So it was just the, the little portion where they were given an honorable exit into Pakistan back again. But I think that we could have delayed the ceasefire for a couple of days perhaps. And what the Americans take credit for that, I don't think they deserve all the credit. The game was over when we captured Tiger Hill at point 4875. After that, the international community can say what they like. But I think as far as the army military operations were concerned, they are the ones which ensured that a ceasefire is possible at that point of time.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not done. I'm not done yet. I'm giving the last word to General Joshi. Which depiction of yourself on cinema do you like the best? Which movie comes closest on a lighter note?
You see, the two movies were made on Op Vijay, and 13 Jackreff, of course, took part in both the movies. So LOC Kargil was made by G.B. Datta. Sanjay Dutt played my role. And, but I think commercially it didn't do well because J.P. Datta had, he spoke to all the boys. He came to my battalion for 3-4 days, he stayed with us. And he wanted to do justice to each and every boy, whom he interviewed, whom he spoke, and he wanted recognition. So therefore the movie was about 4 hours. And the entire movie was about, infantry battalion launching attack, people dying, infantry battalion launching attack, people dying, bravery, courage. While we could identify with each and every soldier, but I think for the public at large, so commercial didn't do well. Sher Shah, Mr. Shabir Boxwala there did outstandingly well, and that was only my battalion, 13 Jack Rifles, and it was Vikram Batra. So yeah, that did commercially also very well, and it was very well made. Of course, I did get integrated with Mr. Shabir Boxwala right from the inception when they made the movie.
Fabulous. 2 minutes on the clock, and I want to play a minute. Oh, I have 15 minutes more. I'm delighted. Can we keep this going with the consent of the floor? Okay. So then I don't have to rush through this. I know you were telling me a story last night about a very risky decision that you had to take in the middle of the battle, about when to fire, what would happen if you would fire. I want you to share that story.
Yeah, so in battle, you have to take risks. If you don't take risk, you will never succeed. And many a times, very risky decisions had to be taken. One particular instance which I was talking about last night was, this was our 4th attack when we were launching attack on point 4875, which is now known as Batra Top in the Mashko Valley. And the gradient was very, very steep, 4875. General Mandupuri just spoke about it. It was a brigade attack while we were tasked to capture the topmost height. And the other 2 battalions were capturing the neighboring features. We got daylighted. 4th of July, we launched the attack. And first light, before the sun came up, we should have actually captured the top. But because of steep gradient, enemy firing, we could not reach the top. So now, on the 5th morning, we were in a situation wherein my troops, Charlie Company and Alpha Company, they were very close. You know, the leading scouts were very close to the enemy, and it was daylight, and the enemy was now able to pick and choose and inflict, you know, heavy casualties from that particular bunker onto our troops. And that is the time the Charlie Company commander, who was the closest, Gurpreet, Major Gurpreet, he spoke to me. I was in the fire base, and he said, this is the problem. Now, I had to do some very quick thinking that can I fire MMGs? It wouldn't have made any effect on the bunker. Can I get artillery, even direct support? Again, troops are very close. And in the firebase, I saw these faggot missile launchers, which were, you know, right in front of me. And we had tried Milan missiles earlier on Toro Link, they didn't work. We had tried so many other things. And I was not sure whether this will work. But on an instinct, I told Kaushal, who was the launcher number 1, to load a missile. I explained to him where to fire. Now, we were to fire, you know, something at a very steep gradient. And I was not sure it will work. But when Kaushal, he, you know, was lying down behind the launcher and he looked through the telescope at that bunker. So he saw the bunker, and along with that, he saw a lot of our troops, you know, in that area. And he was a little hesitant. He was a little shaky that if I fire, you know, I may be hitting on own troops. So, you know, impulsive, I just pushed him to a side. I have been an instructor in the anti-tank missile myself. And as a CO, you know, I had laid down behind the launcher, took aim, and I fired. One had to, you know, spontaneous decision. Innovate, whatever. And fortunately, that missile, you know, while early we were firing even horizontal, the Milan didn't work. But this missile went straight and hit the bunker. Now, the troops were in close contact, but they're looking upward. They didn't know what has happened, what is the effect. But luckily, you know, from 17 yard, the neighboring battalion, they could see some, you know, Jawans running up and down the Pakistanis. And I got that feedback. I fired another missile, which again hit. We inflicted casualties. We got the same feedback. And then I told Gurpreet that, you know, this is a time now, even though it is day, that you need to just push ahead. And Sanjay, sitting here, he was the leading scout of the forwardmost section. And that is where he, along with his section, you know, launched the assault. He got badly shot up, but he, you know, captured that bunker.
Sanjay to actually stand. We must have a round of applause for him. Thank you, sir.
And that is where this action earned him his Paramveer Chakra.
Fabulous. To have a Paramveer Chakra right here and hearing this, at least it is such a special feeling. Now, all of you trained for war. That was your entire training. And I'll tell you, General Puri, I met a young captain, and he said to me, you know, I can see my entire life pass through me on fast forward in this moment. This is the moment I was trained for. He was 22 years old or 23 years old. That kind of wisdom in their, you know, in early 20s for our soldiers to have is amazing. But I want to ask each one of you, what is the one lesson that you learned from Kargil? And did it change you, or did it change your outlook in any way? Did it challenge your assumptions? Because there's one thing to train for something, it's another thing to live it.
You know, one of the everlasting impressions which one has is that why does a soldier obey the order which you give him? You know, it's very unique for for our army. And I think it holds good also for other armies, but I'll talk about the Indian Army. You see, the leadership right from the beginning is so integrated with the soldier. You take it from a platoon commander to a company commander and equivalent in the other regiments. Everyone is involved with the soldier. They know their men as well as, you know, their mothers or fathers know them. They know everything about their characteristics. And I think this is what gives us an edge over other armies when war is declared. It is a personal equation which a leader develops with the rank and file, which is very important. And I think the hallmark of all our training is that you be friendly with the men, but not familiar with them. So I think that distance is kept by both. Mutual respect is there by both. And this is what is a winning factor in war. That the trust which you have and the trust which he reciprocates on you, that he is prepared to give his life, your word of command, I mean, it's not easy for a chap
Does
like
that
him.
does that haunt you? You know,
Yes, it does.
PTSD is something we don't talk about in
No,
India.
no, it does haunt you because it's on your orders that all these lives were lost. It haunts you for a very, very long time. It's not easy to give an order and then, see the consequences of that. Feel the consequences in real time. That is the morning 3 days before you say, okay, 13 Zagreb, capture 5140. And then you have people who are killed in that operation. So, it is on your orders that all this has been done, down the chain of command. Yeah. But it is the integration and the trust, mutual trust, the leader and the men enjoy. I think that's the everlasting impression I've carried even after my retirement.
General Singh?
I have something to add to this discussion today. I have no doubt the heroics carry the day. I want to tell this audience, heroics alone don't win the war. Those 525 people who died, whose thing were not showcased, they fought the same cause, died for the same cause. But behind the heroics was also the prowess which enabled the country to win a war. Now today, I am quite surprised. We do get a pat on the back in the drawing rooms and other when you talk about Artillery did very well, but when it comes to actually crux promoting this cause, then it is lacking. General Malik just said that. It don't take one day to make army, one day to this. If you forget this cause and don't talk about it, then I'm afraid you'll reinvent the wheel in the next war. So very important that you talk about this subject because it's a combined power of the army which wins the war. So I want to request everybody, if you have a chance, please talk about it.
What's the one lesson you learned from Kargil?
The artillery is God of war. One I learned from that, right? And I want to tell you one more thing, that your artillery, you should be proud of your army. What the artillery did in Kargil was also replicated by the Americans in Afghanistan. When they were not able to throw the Talibans out of Tora Bora mountains, they relied on air, they could not do it. And then Captain P. Marcus of the US War College, California, he writes in his thesis, he says, then we do a lesson from Kargil, use the artillery the way we used it, and we won the war. So it has been well acknowledged, word across. So it's a powerful weapon with you, and you see what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine today is relying, it's a prime weapon system in Ukraine war to engage the enemy. So it's a great, the phases of things change every time. The emergent warfare is keeping this factor very alive, that you have a primacy of this weapon system, and therefore we should remember this.
Hey, Marshal, did the war change you?
Well, the earlier wars have changed me, this one a little bit. What I learned from this is that a lot of wisdom resides in the seniors in an organization, but the juniors, the youngsters can come out with brilliant ideas that can change the course of an action or a war.
Did the war change?
Yeah, war definitely changed me. I saw death at very close range. I mean, there are so many examples I can quote. But the biggest lesson, two things. One is that it's all about the team. And here, when I say team, I say the battalion. I was lucky that while I got command in such circumstances, but I was born meaning commissioned into 13 Jagrif, and I got to command 13 Jagrif. And throughout, I was in 13 Jagrif. I knew about 80-90% of my troops by name. I knew their capabilities. They knew my capabilities. So the trust has to be both ways. The trust of your team with the leader, that yeah, he will deliver, and the trust of the leader, on the individual soldiers. So that I was lucky, and that's very important. And also what I want to say is that there were many unsung soldiers. For every round of ammunition, your jerry can of water reaching the top, there were two companies, doing fighting porters who were fetching up the ammunition, fetching up the logistics, the heavy weapons, the ammunition, and they go unsung. But if they were not there, then the guy who is right in front earning the Paramveer Chakra, wouldn't have got the opportunity. And the second thing I want to say is all about your self-respect. It is all about izzat. In a battalion, death to dishonor. Boy will prefer to die than be called a coward in the battalion. So that is where, the entire infantry battalion,
the driving force comes. Was there ever, General Puri, a nuclear shadow in terms of planning? That if we do this, it could escalate to this level. Was that ever on your mind?
Now, as far as the nuclear is concerned, when you're fighting the war, I mean, we were not even thinking of the nuclear aspects. And we had left it to General Malik to handle that part. But basically, I don't think it's a good thing. We could have called the Pakistani bluff as far as the nuclear card is concerned. You see, every time any incident takes place, they always play the nuclear card. You know, if there is some action, some terrorist attack, there's a don't retaliate, you know, we have nuclear weapons and all these things. So I really, but when you're fighting a war, we never thought about the nuclear aspects. It didn't even cross our minds, though both the countries were nuclear
So
nations.
let me ask you this as the final word. Could there be another Kargil? I ask you this at a time when the border and the line of control is hot right now. There is a kind of resumed targeted infiltration. There is an apprehension that this time too, there is the involvement of Pakistani regulars, either active or recently retired. Could there be another Kargil?
I don't think so. You know, now things have changed. We have better intelligence capabilities, better surveillance capabilities. We are very well deployed on the ground, both against China and Pakistan. So in my mind, I don't think there can be a repeat of Kargil. The minor skirmishes will continue, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a Kargil too. So whether it is on the northeastern side or whether it is against Pakistan or in Ladakh, yes, those tensions will prevail, but I don't think we'll ever have a repeat of Kargil too.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's because of all the men in this room who were able to deliver victory in Kargil that we can say today that there won't be another Kargil. In the 2 minutes that we have left, I want to play out just a little bit of the clips that General Joshi has carried, and then I'd like to end this with all of us standing in a moment of tribute to the lives that were lost in the line of duty in Kargil. But first, if we can just have a look. I'm hoping some of the footage you've carried is mine. Yeah. But let's have a look at General Joshi's... I don't know what they're playing, but a minute of just taking us back to the war front.
If we don't perform now, function now, then our whole existence cannot be justified.
So that was a big challenge for us, but we had to do it, and we did it.
Terrain is so tough. I'm driving in a car. You know, probably I know the road is not that great. And, you know, I was actually figuring out that when the war was actually happening, I was thinking that how these people would have managed to go such a steep on the foot. And you never know when a bullet or a splinter hits you and you know more there.
तो इनका जवाब था कि आप चिंता मत करो, मैं या तो दुश्मन की पोस्ट पर झंडा लहरा करके आऊँगा और या फिर मैं झंडे में लिपट करके वापस आऊँगा.
Like we have done it, like we were on the top of the world. It was a great feeling to have. So yeah, we had already decided our success signal before advancing for the attack. My company's success signal was "Ye dil mange more, dil mange more, dil mange more, dil mange more."
Well, that's very moving, and I remember doing all of those interviews that you just saw. Each one of them, from the young captain in the beginning in the bunker, when he was speaking, the Tiger Hill assault was happening, and he said, I can see my whole life in front. And that young man who looked a lot like Vikram Batra is his twin. 10 years after the Kargil War, General Joshi, myself and Vikram Batra went back to the war. Vikram Batra's twin went back to the war front. And Vikram Batra's twin Vishal had gone back for the very first time to Kargil. For 10 years, he hadn't had the courage, he said, to go back. And we went to what is now called Batra Top, and he said he could feel the presence of his brother there. And he wrote a letter to Vikram, and he set the letter into the sky, and we stood there and we watched the paper fly up to the clouds, and he cried, and I cried, and then he said, I can't imagine how our men climbed those jagged peaks. So in conclusion, a huge round of applause for the extraordinary men on our stage, but also off the stage, General Malik, Sanjay sir, so many others. May I request everybody to stand for one moment, or maybe a couple of moments of silence in tribute to the lives sacrificed in the line of duty for India. Thank you very much. A documentary when we went back? So
I'd like to call upon General Malik along with Colonel David and Dr. Renuka to please present the panel with a token of our appreciation.
मैम आपको
We have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, and a big, big round of applause to Barkha Dutt, of course, for leading that panel so beautifully.